Greetings and salutations, everybody. I wanted to try a different format video here, covering some of Tim Burton's films as we work our way towards the release of the sequel to Beetlejuice, titled Beetlejuice in September of this year. But instead of trying to do like a video for every single one of his feature films that he's directed, I broke it down into different time frames. So we're going to do the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. And for those time frames, simply going through some high points about those films and what I've enjoyed about them. So, let's start with the 80s, which includes his films Pee-wee's Big Adventure from 1985, Beetlejuice from 1988, and Batman from 1989. Okay, so, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I'm pretty sure that I didn't really get to see this one until it hit cable. By then I was like loosely aware of who Pee-wee was, but he hadn't really exploded onto the scene from what I was at least exposed to at the time. But watching this film, I remember my initial thoughts were feeling like, kind of like I did with Buckaroo Banzai, like I was just kind of not in on the joke initially, wondering if I missed something beforehand, like a comic or a TV show perhaps. But aside from all that, first point about Burton's films, we'll go for this one, which I would have to say, I just loved how quickly this film just throws you right into Pee-wee's world. We get that really weird dream sequence of him, on the bike, plus waking up in his like Rube Goldberg kind of house that he has for all of his little gadgets and everything, and his little confrontation with Francis, after learning about how much he loves that bike of his. Somehow they did this perfect job of just bringing us on board with very little build-up needed to just kind of get us right into this in a really high-paced way. Now, the second aspect of his films, which will also be for Pee-wee, is going to be the brand of comedy, which I just found really great. Somehow bringing this childlike humor across from an adult to the point where it isn't even clear who he is or why he is the way he is. We just kind of accept it. Burton really filled any gaps on screen with this very crazy and whimsical look mixed with a few dark and dangerous scenes, such as a biker bar or Large Marge or being chased off by a woman's husband. He really mixed this super childlike side of it with more adult problems, kind of going back and forth. So we find some humor in seeing a child kind of put into this environment in a way, or at least how he kind of reacts to it as this man-child kind of thing. Third aspect of his films for Pee-wee is going to be the pacing. It worked really well. I'd say, this is kind of like a road trip movie, and it really speeds by as we kind of close in, not just on Pee-wee finally getting his bike back by the end, but definitely coming like full circle with the movie premiere for this. And, where we see all the characters that he came across throughout his journey kind of coming back for those closing scenes. Just really came back full circle on a pace that just rocketed us right through that. So now, let's move on to Beetlejuice from 3 years later, another one which I felt like I should know something about it going into it. I had no idea what a Beetlejuice was, if it was something I should have been aware of. I was dimly aware that there was a star called Beetlejuice and wondered if maybe I should be more familiar with this name. I had no idea what Beetlejuice even meant. But, so for the fourth thing that I like about his films, just like Pee-wee, we have a very excellent and fast-paced introduction to get us up to speed with these two ghosts. So little time is needed for us to get kind of right on board with this one. We understand them, their relationship, that somebody's interested in buying their house, that they're there on vacation, and how they die. So number 5 would say how this pace of this film and everything kind of unfolds. This idea of how the afterlife works is so well thought out. It's so creative. So much detail as to how things actually work. It's easy to understand, and there's a lot of humor in it. From the man who was hit by a bus to the football team, all the people kind of working there and in the waiting room, not to mention Juno, our caseworker in this. Everything about that pace and the idea of how all this unfolds really comes across great. And number 6, which will go for Beetlejuice, is going to be just our introduction to Beetlejuice himself and his role in everything, how well that kind of comes across. It just makes everything even better, where while I love the character of Beetlejuice by this point, and I'd be up for more screen time, honestly, he's in there just enough to balance and answer the questions about the mystery surrounding him and what's happening with these characters, and have a lot of this comedy. Because he's this really great contrast between like these uppity parents that Lydia has, going against, how they already have this little duality with Lydia, with her being the more dark one that doesn't really want to conform. So these new tenants moving in, how different they are, even just from our initial two ghosts, everything kind of balances out perfectly, where it never feels like any character is not really spoken about enough or used enough. And Beetlejuice, being this very wild and crazy character and all that, really comes across great and shakes things up. Simply amazing. Now, I will say before I move on to the 7th item here as we go into the Batman films, is that I have been wanting a sequel to Beetlejuice for years. I remember hearing rumors of it. I know at some point, I think Kevin Smith was supposed to possibly write a Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian or something else. We had a little bit of that cartoon for a while and everything, but we've had these rumors of this film for so long, and so many fan-made posters and fan-made trailers, that I kind of joke that I still won't believe this movie is actually happening until I'm sitting in the theater, even though there has been official trailers and posters out. It's just been so long, I'm like, I'm not going to believe it until the opening credits start up in that movie theater, because I definitely intend to see this one on the big screen. So, moving on to item number 7 here, as we get to the Batman film of 1989, the first one that he did, just the next year. This one, for my 7th item, is that it's really stood the test of time. It holds up despite some odd special effects shots, which, literally some of them are like hand animated. But outside of that, it really holds up after all these years. A lot of his films do, but this one is particularly interesting that it's held up better than some of the ones that came after it. So number 8 on the Tim Burton stuff that I like about those 80s films would be the mix of the darkness and camp that he has in this Batman film. Because we've already seen that mix of darkness and camp and comedy kind of brought in previously in some of his other films. But all we had really to go on with this Batman one, by any kind of comparison, was the Adam West TV show, which is very campy. So somehow they were able to take this Dark Knight aspect from the comics and mix it with the camp that we were used to from Adam West, and not have either one kind of overshadowing too much in this installment. Now for number 9 of the Tim Burton stuff here, from the 80s, is his choice to use Michael Keaton as Batman. This was a very bold move back in the day, as at the time he was mainly known for comedies such as like Mr. Mom and Gung Ho. But he brought this duality in Bruce Wayne versus Batman, which compares to the duality of the camp and the darkness that we have in this film. So we have one of the best performances, in my opinion, which show the difference between Bruce and Batman, which weren't seen as well in later interpretations by Kilmer and Clooney. Even with Christian Bale, we didn't get a whole lot of that. We only got a few scenes where we really got to see him be very different as Bruce versus Batman. And 10, just in general, the final of the 10 things I love about Tim Burton's films of the 80s is that the overall style that he brought our way was introduced so well. Between like Beetlejuice and Batman, showing that mix of the darkness and that broody, spooky feel with some very campy horror almost and humor, kind of balanced perfectly with that. While even with Pee-wee, he brought in this very whimsical and crazy kind of feel, more along the lines of like a silly and campy, going with Pee-wee's more adult and dangerous and scary situations that he gets himself into. I feel like with these 3 films, he really set the tone for what we should be expecting from him going forward, something which, he was building the base for with some of his previous work, especially short films such as Frankenweenie and Vincent, before these features had come out. So all in all, those are my 10 aspects of the Tim Burton films of the 80s, which I really enjoyed and really stuck out the most. So now the question is, what about the 90s? So, he had a lot of success with these films in the 80s, and while not necessarily being given like a blank check, either financially or creatively going forward, he definitely had a lot of doors open up. The doors of opportunity had swung wide open for him to bring us some more films, and he really kind of set up, this is my style, and this is what you can kind of expect from me going forward. And for those ones of the 90s, be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell icon wherever it shows up there to get notified for when I put up the next video in this series, which is going to be for his films of the 90s. So we have a few more to cover. I'm going to find at least 10 things that I enjoy about these, those being Edward Scissorhands from 1990, Batman Returns from 1992, Ed Wood from 1994, Mars Attacks from 1996, and Sleepy Hollow from 1999. Now, Mars Attacks and Sleepy Hollow I haven't seen in a very long time, so I definitely need some time to do a rewatch of those. Mars Attacks, I even have this idea of maybe seeing if I could watch it in a different format. Maybe if I can get that in black and white somehow, get that feel of the old 50s and 60s sci-fi. I might have to do a separate video for that one, entirely. But anyways, got 5 films to try to cover, so I'll have at least 2 or 3 things about each one of those to talk about to give you another 10 to 15 things I love about Tim Burton's film of the 90s. So that should be coming up in a couple weeks as we get closer to September. So be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon, and I will see you in that next video.